Azazel Jacobs, you wrote and directed his Three Daughters, about the title characters, sisters who come together and often clash with each other as their father is at the end of his life. What inspired you to tell this story?
Um, I think, well, I grew up in Lower Manhattan. I went away to Los Angeles for many, many years. I came back, my wife and I moved back here for a bunch of reasons, but one of them was to become a caretaker to my parents who suddenly hit an age and there's suddenly health conditions that suddenly were just like right there that felt very far away from most of my life and then was very up close. So coming back to New York City, the place that I was raised, um, and trying to, I'd have this window between 6 and 9 a.m. before the kind of storm of just figuring out how to become a caretaker and just like what that meant, especially not having kids. So, okay, you do this and do that, and I need to get this form and that form. I had a window like basically from sun up to nine that I could just walk through New York City and I was extremely inspired by the life that I was seeing, not only with the stresses that I was living, and I think that had got me writing. Like that, I really wanted to do something that was expressing what I was going through and just the kind of frustration and fears that I had, but also the hopes and the joy that I was seeing, just being back home.
And these three characters you create are so detailed and specific. How did you discover these characters and their personalities and how they butt up against each other and flesh them out?
It was a way of me making peace with like the different approaches that I was having. Like I found myself kind of shape shifting into very different people when I first came back and being like, oh, I need to get this form, or I just want to run away, or I want to just kind of be a peacekeeper the best way that I could. And realizing that I could separate those different feelings into not only characters but into siblings and keep them under the same house gave me some separation within myself and put them in conflict with each other in a way that I was kind of feeling deep inside, but now suddenly it became external, and so that was the beginning of that.
Was there any of the characters that were more challenging to write than the others, would you say?
No, I mean the truth is that this was completely the opposite of the experience of kind of becoming a caretaker. This is like a lot of fun to write. And the moment that I understood that these different kind of approaches were actually these different sisters, I just started writing, and I was very into the idea of having, especially that Katie, the first sister, opens up with this page and a half monologue, and that was so freeing for me. That was the first thing that I wrote, and it just like it opened up things in a way that I wouldn't express things in this way. I usually don't write characters that express that are kind of talk so much and say everything that they're thinking. But it kind of drew a, not only did it like set off a train, but it drew a battle line from the beginning that I could see could carry me all the way through the story.
Early on, the sisters seem to have these very clear, delineated roles in the family. You know who they are to each other, like the responsible one, the caretaker, the peacekeeper, all those things. But that sort of we see how much more complicated they are as the story progresses. How did you plot out those character arcs and where they would go and where they would end up?
I think plotting would be the wrong word. It was more just digging and digging. And like, I like this idea of starting with such surface level, like we are these people even real? Like she's, it's written very much the way that I cut it. So, having, let's say, Katie against the white wall, like wanting to feel like it was an audition. So they're kind of like starts off as very surface characters. And then as I dug deeper into like what could make that person perform this way, suddenly you start seeing seams in them and you realize like, oh, well, I think that especially my aims in the beginning was that they're portraying roles that they expect of themselves or they think their sisters expect of each of themselves. And which is something that I like find at least true to my own life, which is like no matter what I've gone through, and when I go back with a certain, family or certain friends, I just go back into the role that I think that they expect of me. And then after time, hopefully something else goes. So it was starting off with the kind of these opposing tracks as they start clashing with each other, digging deeper and deeper, and then suddenly realizing, okay, that could come from that. And then, when I get to the place where, let's say, Christina and Katie have their own kind of childhood language, we start understanding like, oh, they actually had a very quite different childhood to a certain point than Rachel. So this is one of those scripts that I wrote forward rather than plotting out so much and just like listened to them and listened to a certain type of rhythm that I was chasing, not only in terms of the way that they spoke, but the rhythm that I feel happens when you're facing something as serious as somebody passing and you know it's absolutely going to happen because it seems to have an odd effect on time, at least in my experience.
And most of the film takes place in this one apartment. What's it like writing a story that's very much this one setting for the most part, a story, and how difficult was it to kind of find that right space, to actually film it?
Well, it's not difficult because it's fun because because it's so contained, it's pretty easy to go like, okay, this is happening in the kitchen, this is going in the bedroom, everything's so close, so it's just like a jump over there, and realizing like, oh, we definitely will need some air. I needed some air, so we'd go down to the bench with Rachel. Like any time that I felt like I felt suffocated while I was writing, then I would step out with Rachel and try to get this air with her while she kind of smokes on the bench. Um, I had like not only did I write with these actors in mind, but I was writing with a certain type of apartment that I grew up visiting, growing up here quite a lot, where you could feel the family in the walls. You could feel there's a history, you could feel the generations, and there was something that the rooms, the bed on the floor, the what chair, the father's chair, the worn chairs, the what the tables were. There was some specific thing that I was chasing down, but so it made me reach out to a lot of kids that I grew up with that grew up in rent stabilized place, and that led me down to this path of this building, in the Lower East Side, and uh, and I was able to amazingly have access to a lot of people opened up their doors as possibilities for us to shoot. But walking into that particular apartment, like even though it was a young couple there and it was very modernized, it felt like the bones were just evident. Like there was something there, like, oh, I could feel history, and I knew that I could take advantage of having a place like that, which was like if I teased out the way that we see the place, it would take a while for us to understand how the sisters are connected or not connected.
Now, for the most part in the film, we don't see the father on screen. How did you decide exactly how their father would or wouldn't be a part of the story? With him looming over it, kind of like already kind of like the spectral presence.
Yeah, I think it wasn't a decision. It was one of these things when I was writing, and suddenly I had pretty much set up a rule that we wouldn't be going into this bedroom. I was surprised when I was writing and then they were bringing the father out. It kind of scared me in a way, which was like, oh, I had such a kind of small, neat film, and now suddenly things are getting complicated in a way that, yeah, that worried me. But I also chase after that feeling when things worry me, and also I like that in films sometimes when they cross into a direction that I really wasn't expecting. When it starts kind of it has these coloring lines, and then it colors outside of those lines. Ultimately, once I started hearing what the father had to say, which is the mixture of a lot of things that either I've thought about or I've heard or my own have come from my own parents, um, it became very important to me. Like I needed to hear those words. And all I had to do then was just kind of just stick with it with the understanding that it may not be for everybody, but because my desire for those words was so deep, I felt like some other people will feel the same way, and I just followed that through. Of course, like I wasn't writing for J.O. Sanders, but it became a whole other thing once I sat down with him and realized like, oh, he brings this it explains something that the film was talking about, which is like the only way to feel certain death is through absence. And so having somebody, such a powerful and amazing actor like Jay, say those words, I feel like ultimately I could stand back and say, I don't know if I could have made that point that I about the fantasy of portraying death, but also what absence means when someone's gone without getting a bit of the father.
I want to thank you for talking to me about your film. Congratulations on it, and it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Same. Thank you so much.